Hey guys, welcome back to Critical Flick. Today I'm going to talk about Hellboy. Now I have to say, before this movie even came out, I remember the trailers coming out and I was very skeptical about it. I thought it didn't really look that good, and I was going into it still with an open mind because I wasn't the biggest fan in the world of Del Toro's original movies. I like them, don't get me wrong, I think they're really well made, I think they look really good, I think he did a masterful job creating this world using practical effects, and I think he's an amazing director. I just didn't love the movies. I don't think they're bad movies, they just didn't resonate with me. So I wasn't as upset about Hellboy getting a reboot and it being this new thing, and I was a little excited to see what they were going to do with it. Turns out I shouldn't have been. So this new Hellboy, who stars David Harbour playing Hellboy, is basically a story about Hellboy learning where his origins come from, becoming something that's part of his destiny, and fighting this evil witch trying to take over the world. It's a very generic story. The plot of the actual movie is fairly basic. It tries to get really intricate with its lore, and it just loses you. It just feels like a bunch of fetch quests from like a video game, like we need to go here to get this object, and a lot of it is just a lot of basic exposition about lore, and nothing about it feels very tangible. It feels very real. You don't feel like you're in a lived-in universe like you did in the original films. Now, I know this may be a consequence of really relying on some of the source material for Hellboy, but it doesn't really work for this movie. I think that this movie might have worked better as an animated film with all the ridiculous amounts of effects that are used in this movie. The movie looks really bad whenever they try to use visual effects. I did think that some of the positives of the movie were the actual physical set pieces of the movie. They seemed like they were pretty interesting. I thought that Hellboy's makeup wasn't awful. I don't think it's as good as Del Toro's makeup, but it's not the worst thing in the world. But when you see the visual effects, it just takes you out of the movie instantly. It's terrible, just almost like Scooby-Doo on Monster Island quality monsters. Especially there's a particular scene where he fights trolls, and that looks absolutely god-awful. Another visual effect that looks absolutely terrible is when one of the characters has the ability to bring the dead, not necessarily back to life, but they can use her as a conduit to come back and speak with the living, and that looks so bad. It looks like unfinished CGI. It looks like borderline Scorpion King. It looks just awful, and I don't know how making this movie they thought that some of that could just slide and be fine, and people were gonna be like, oh, it's just bad CG. There's a ton of it. They will look over it. I couldn't get past it. It looked that bad. As for the acting in the movie, it at times wasn't terrible, but I think that the actors didn't have a lot to work with. I think this script felt very thrown together. There was a lot of really cringy dialogue in it. It felt like they were going for comedy at times, and it didn't land. A lot of the comedy in this movie doesn't land at all, and it kind of feels like a really stark tone shift, because there are moments in the movie that I feel like I'm supposed to be taking it seriously and taking everything that's happening around these characters seriously and really being interested in this lore, and they don't complement it with comedy, they underscore it, and it's just so awkward. There's so many moments with characters that feel so awkward. I thought that David Harbour's performance in particular was actually pretty fine. I thought that he did, like I said, he didn't have a lot to work with, and some of his lines did come off very wooden when he said them, but you could tell he was actually trying. I actually thought Mila Jovovich was trying a little bit. I didn't think that she was that awful, but her character is so serious in a movie that is so not serious and can't be taken seriously. I thought that Daniel Day Kim was one of the worst parts of the movie. I think his character's deliveries were so awkward and cringy and wooden that I never found it funny. I never found any of his one-liners funny. They felt super weird, and like his characters felt so out of place in this movie, but he felt shoehorned in. And towards the end of the movie, he does have an interesting thing going on with him. He does have some interesting aspects to his character, but throughout the film, he just felt like this just weird like character. They're just gonna pop in here and he's gonna be like in the background, kind of be the straight man of the story, and I didn't like it at all. Some of the things about the movie that could have been really epic or really positive attributes of it just kept getting underscored again by that terrible CGI in it. That was really the thing that bothered me the most. It looked so bad. It looked almost like a sci-fi movie. And if you go into this thinking of it as a high-budget sci-fi movie that's just totally ridiculous, totally crazy, you might find something to enjoy about it. There were moments that I found the utter ridiculousness of what was going on screen somewhat entertaining, but then I was just constantly taken back by how terrible the CGI was. It felt like the studio put it out there, didn't take the time to even make it look realistic at moments, especially, like I said, the troll scene. That bothered me, so the giant scene, it bothered me so much. Like, Hellboy literally feels so disjointed from everything that's going on around him that it's laughable. It was almost comedic. There were moments in this film where it was looking so terrible that I wanted to laugh. And there were moments that they used this CG that should have been very heartfelt, particularly a moment with Hellboy and his father, and it just looked so bad that I couldn't do it. And I think that was really holding back the movie from ever really being that good. So if I were to rate this movie, I would give it a 2.5 out of 10. I don't think it is absolutely unredeemable. I don't think it's awful. I just think that they should have spent a lot more time thinking about what they were going to do if they were going to reboot this series, because you have some big shoes to fill. You have some iconic makeup and designs and characters that already exist, and if you're willing to take the risk and reboot these without the original pieces that you have in store, you needed to do it right. You need to make it look good, because that was always a hallmark of this franchise, is looking very interesting, regardless of how convoluted the stories were, how strange the movies were. It always looked really good, and you always felt like it was very lived in and very interesting, and the lore was very compelling. This feels like very basic. Everything about it felt very basic. It felt kind of rushed. The movie, I'll say, isn't super boring. It is a kind of a long movie. It kept me somewhat entertained, but maybe not always in the best ways, the way they intended me to be entertained. But yeah, overall, just pretty disappointed in it. I kind of wasn't expecting a whole lot from it, but it could have done more. It could have been a lot better. I think it was a waste of doing this, and I think that it could have been done better, and they shouldn't really try this anymore unless they're going to go in a completely different direction. Like I said, animated, I think this would be a really cool story and a really cool thing to see an animated Hellboy movie. And I think we could maybe see that in the future. I've heard talks about series and things. But yeah, just overall, I really was disappointed in this one. Alright guys, thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe. And if you saw the newest Hellboy film, how did you feel about it? Were you as disappointed as I was? Maybe you really enjoyed it, and I think that would be awesome if I could get some comments from people that really liked this movie. I think it's been overwhelmingly panned between critics and people that have seen it. So if you found something enjoyable about it, maybe you thought the just ridiculousness of it was enjoyable in and of itself, comment down below, and see you guys next time.